Hi guys, welcome to another video on May in Bloom. Today's video is going to be a bit chill because it's gloomy. At least outside is gloomy, but the subject itself is maybe not the lightest. I think it is now, but it's something that I feel kind of explains how I really got into not only just holistic but sovereign living from a decolonial perspective. Death plays a huge role in how I feel that people live their life, at least their ideas of death, their ideas of what's going to happen to them once they stop existing, what they've been taught about death. But death is also like the ultimate fear. And fear in the way that life is set up is a huge catalyst for many of the things we do, many of the things we don't do. There is either a choice to ignore our mortality or to demonize it because we think that life is the only thing worth having or worth experiencing. And especially I'm talking like life as us, like right now, like we are just here and we fear that what is beyond here, right? But I also think depending on where you come from in life, it can have a huge impact on how you approach life and if you are able to make the best out of your life. So we're going to have this talk today, finally, on my iPad, because then I feel like we're just, chill. I'm just like video calling a friend and it doesn't have to be so crazy because the thoughts are probably going to be a bit everywhere. But there is threads there somehow. Anyway, so for me, I grew up basically religious, like most African children. Some religions believe that when you die, it's when you meet Judgment Day right away. Our religion, I was in the Seventh-day Adventist. Our religion believed that when you die, everybody just goes to rest. And then one day there will be Judgment Day and everybody will be risen and then judged accordingly. Basically, the ending of life is the ending of this test. And there is either a reward or punishment at the end. Now, these are very important things, at least for me, because this then decides, obviously, how you live your life. If you know that at the end of life, there's going to be like punishment or reward for how you lived your life on earth. This experience here is seen, like I say, like a trial. Like, are you going to find the right religion, practice according to your religion's doctrine, and then be rewarded by this deity in the sky for everlasting life? Or are you going to be burned with the earth? And when I think about it now, it's so wild. My mom, of course, was very religious, and she grew up also very religious, but I would say that once we were detached from the bigger family, it was a bit more relaxed. I didn't feel like it was as toxic and as detrimental as a lot of people who grew up in very religious homes. But the philosophy of life, or the philosophy of why we're here, what we're supposed to do, that still had a huge impact because it framed kind of like how you went about life and what you expected from life, but what was expected of you after you die, or what was going to happen to you after you die. But as I've also shared with you guys, like I left religion in 2013 after weeks of crazy research that was sparked by a thought. And after finishing like the last day on the third week, I was like, I can't believe in this anymore. And it just absolutely changed my life. And there in the beginning, it was just the religion itself, like how the book came to be, but also understanding like how the book has been changed and how who gets to change it. Do I trust the intentions of those people? And there was just a lot of questions that I finally had the time to explore when I was in my early 20s. And my conclusion was that I don't believe in this anymore, basically. And that was really liberating and scary. First, it was scary, but then after, it was liberating. It was scary in the sense of like, who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose? I had always also believed that you are only good, or you only do good things because this fear of death and of hell and the reward of heaven. And when those things are not there, like, what kind of person are you going to be without the ever watching eyes of God judging your every movement, what have you? So when that was really removed from my way of approaching life and what I felt like life was, I did wonder, like, am I going to be evil? Am I going to just go out and be reckless? Like, now life has no meaning. But what, like, shorter story, what I found was that life had even more meaning, and there was even more reasons to do the things I do and care about the things I care about. But they were not hanging on the fact that I might get rewarded or punished if I don't. I could then really reclaim my life as my own, and I realized that that's what I didn't have as a religious person. For me, realizing that I didn't belong to myself, I belonged to this game I don't remember signing up to, and my progression in the game and winning or losing the game and then being punished and all this stuff that now that I look back, I understand like how it can really impact the way you live life, and not only that, but also impact what you think about yourself, your abilities, your value, that you're just here along with even though like they're contradicting ideas of the Bible. That's why also, like, for me, finally didn't make sense to base my life off of it. I'm still now, like, decades later, now I'm actually kind of interested in revisiting it, but as, you know, like a book, like where there are things there, like with anything, good or bad or true or false, there are still things in there that you can learn from. But basically, so growing up religious, leaving religion, and then questioning everything, like a holistic decolonial approach, where I was questioning also what is life, and therefore I also need to understand what is death. And I explored different philosophies on that, different takings on that. What happens to us when we're not here anymore? Like, does it even matter? Does the only thing matter is what I'm actually aware of right now, and that is that I'm here, that I'm alive, and should I care so much about what happens after? Well, I'm curious, so I did, but I also didn't care as much because I knew, regardless of the things I can philosophize about life beyond this experience, what I know for sure, which is something that I try to ground myself in, what do I know for sure? What do I see for sure? What do I feel for sure? Is that I'm here. What I see for sure is, like, especially as somebody who loves nature and observing nature, that things have cycles and everything feeds each other, right? When something decomposes, it feeds the earth, and then the earth feeds us. Like, there is this beautiful cycle. So then I was like, okay, if whatever created this, whatever intelligence is behind this, whatever consciousness is behind this, because I didn't leave religion and become an atheist, because I also feel like that's also a bit, that would be arrogant to assume there is nothing. There's too much to be so blank and like, okay, there's only this God, or there is no God at all. I think whatever it is, it talks to us and lives within us. Nobody has to teach you. Nobody has to connect you with it. It is within you. It's uncorruptible. And anybody who's trying to sell you or guide you or tell you it's this or that, especially if you don't feel aligned, it's just a perspective. It's not the truth. But the truth is, it's as pure for me as breathing, and we all know what that feels like, as being in the ocean or feeling the sun or the wind, or like it is whatever it is. We're already connected to it. And now I'm talking about why this thing is, so that we are here to experience life and then death, possibly, right? But then, like, beyond that, by observing nature and knowing, okay, what I know for sure is when I will die, the earth will decompose me. I will feed all these organisms and they will create life. So death feeds life. Interesting. So everything that ends is tied to a beginning. Okay. That's a pattern. That's something I'm noticing. Everything is tied together. Everything is a cycle. Okay, a cycle. There is no beginning. There's no end. It's continuous. Okay, I can actually relate to that. I understand that. I can see how that would be the case. Mother Nature does not seem wasteful. it feels like everything has its divine special place on earth. And I would imagine whatever our spirit, because whatever this is also where our spirit comes from. That's what I believe. Well, then that would also mean that even our spirit lives in the same way. Maybe we continue, maybe we come back. And then I was like, okay, then what am I? Who am I? Like, yes, my body's going to be decomposed, but who am I? Like, do I, like, and then from that exploration, I got into learning more about consciousness, like the spirit, the soul. And that is a whole other conversation that I'm also excited to share with you guys at some point. But for now, on death. Once I recognize that there's nothing to fear, keyword or key sentence, but fear itself. That's something we always heard, even when I was religious. But I never got it until I could see the weight of fear that had been removed from my shoulders, no longer being religious, and now also no longer fearing death. Now, don't get me wrong, like, I don't want to suffer, and I hope I live a long enough life, but I'm very much more keen on the quality of my life rather than the like longevity of my life. I want to live a healthy, purposeful, bright life, and the time does not matter as much. And it doesn't because, like I said, understanding the cycle of life, I'm not afraid of what else then comes. Whatever it is has always been. That means parts of me have always existed. Everything that has made me has always existed. Like, in order for me to eat, to form this body, to form all the cells in my body, I am part of what has always been and always will be in one way or the other. Like, I was a baby, I was a fetus in my mom's belly, and then she was feeding me with everything she ate from the earth. And, like, and then I grew up and I was born, and then I grew up and I continue to eat, and I continue to be part of the world in so many different ways in what I consume, what I make use of. And then when my time is up and they bury me, I will continue in different way. And I love that so much more than this idea that my life didn't belong to me, but something had created me and it was testing me. That's how it felt, even though it's like, no, it wasn't test, it was the devil who messed things up, and now God is trying to make it right. Yeah, but still, I didn't choose to be part of this little game between the devil and God. So I still felt like I had no say, even though it was like, yeah, you have free will, you can choose A or B. Yeah, but I don't want to choose A and B. I want to choose C, maybe D, E, F, G. I want to not have to care. Where is that? Like, where's option out of whatever this is? Because as long as I didn't choose to be here, I don't feel like I have to follow these rules. Anyway, like, so that helped me like illegitimize like my whole ideas and fears around what religion had taught me, and reclaiming my life, reclaiming my time, and living from a place of freedom in that sense. Like, I'm gonna enjoy my life the best I can. I've been created, of course, from, like I said, everything that has always been. All my features and my cells, my DNA have been passed through a long lineage. I am a combination of so many choices, so many experiences, and so many lives. I am part of something bigger just by existing. And I am part of adding to that bigness just by existing. And when I die, I will feed that existence just by decomposing. Like, it was such a beautiful new realization of life for me, and how it felt like to be here in a community way, we are one but separate. And now that you're here, you're free to be. There are no rules in how to be here. Like, you can watch my other video on that, like why I choose to live a life of experience versus societal milestones. But basically, from that understanding, I could see that just like the birds and the trees and everything, like, life is for life's sake. Life is for life's sake. We're here just as the trees, just as the oceans, birds, worms, just to live. And by living in accordance to ourselves, we naturally add to this big experience that we call life. And the consciousness or awareness we have to experience it. So that is chapter 1, leaving religion, redefining what life and death meant to me. And then the next chapter was obviously, what now? What am I going to do now with this experience of living, this experience that, for how I understand it, is just by itself is the gift you get to live. Now, like beyond that, I've been like dipping my toes in other theories, like in this last year, these last few months and years, and there's a lot I'm discovering. And I feel like maybe those things are more like for Abantu May, my other channel about decolonization and Black consciousness, but like, because there's a lot of stuff. But basically, like once you understand that the way religions have been put together are also created to instill fear in people. And once you can tell people why they're here and let them fear not complying to a certain degree, you can also obviously control how they live their life here. And I also then believe, like on another level, obviously, that our souls, which are free, that our souls cannot be harmed, they cannot be touched, they cannot be influenced by any, like in the sense that there is you, there is me who's speaking and talking and thinking and feeling and like, and then there's the observer, the awareness of all of that. And that belongs to a higher like consciousness. Also, you don't have to believe any of this. Like I'm very big on take what you can use from this and leave the rest. That's how I try to live my life, at least. So for me, believing in that, like when you live this life and you're filled with fear, you're fearful of living because you're afraid of death, and you want to avoid death by any means necessary. We saw this a lot during the Panini, and how people were easier to control and direct and give up certain freedoms simply by making them fear dying, right? Somebody who's not afraid to die because there's nothing to fear about death is really hard to control. It reminds me a bit about stories I heard during the enslavement of Africans, and how some Africans, because they had we all had our own worldviews before colonization and imperialism and this force of the Eurocentric worldview on the rest of the world, which we're still under, which is why for me, living a sovereign life is also with an approach of decolonization, because you get to understand that you're living in a reality that is created a certain way, but that had to destroy so many different worldviews to have this singular worldview that is not going to be beneficial for everybody, or is going to help people really tap into their power and potential because they are trying to fit a reality, a narrative, a paradigm that is not for them, and in which they can only play a submissive role, like a inferior role. But once you can understand that's one reality, one dimension, and you have the right to choose to opt out, because we are all free beings and we create according to what we believe, and we live according to the limitations we buy into, the stories we buy into, the stories we think are the only way of seeing life, of seeing ourselves and our time here. But once you liberate yourself from that, you get to create, as I always say, you get to choose, you get to investigate, and you get to live from a place of understanding that I am reclaiming my sovereignty and my living right from the natural law perspective, that you are here and now you get to choose how to be here until your time is up as this vessel, as this being, but then you continue in other ways, right? Now, for some people, that goes all the way to reincarnation, which for a while I was like, yeah, that could actually make sense. But then I explored also more about consciousness, especially people who share about out-of-body experiences, lucid dreaming, and being able to explore just with your spirit and soul, which is like the awareness, the higher self, but like it's still you, but it's where people are able to explore different ways of life or different ways of understanding our time here, even different consciousness and different planets. That's a whole different thing, which I'm still like exploring and feeling curious about. And for me, that's the most important thing. I don't have to believe everything or take everything, but I'm like, once I didn't have to base all my life on one book, the Bible, like I became curious about everything else, but not so open-minded that my brain will fall out, because everything I don't want to be enslaved in a new way of thinking or paradigm, or so I'm very like, okay, how does this liberate me? How does this add more freedom and more possibility to navigate the world with more confidence and more sovereignty? When you realize that life is also duality, it's life and death, it's the individual and community, it's connectiveness and disconnection, it's all of these beautiful things that create harmony in some way. And none is good, none is bad. Being born is not good, dying is not bad. It's all like playing a bigger symphony, if that makes sense. If you're not afraid of dying because you don't see it as something bad, and before like a lot of religious teachings, that's how a lot of indigenous people saw death, that it was a transition, right? A return to Mother Earth, or some people say like you pass on, you go to live a different life. There was this book I was reading called Of Water and Spirit. I can't remember the name, Patrice, I think. Can't remember the author, but he was talking about life during colonization in Burkina Faso. He was part of a group of children that had been abducted by missionary schools, specifically Catholic missionary schools, and then indoctrinated into European thought, European worldview, European religion, and told to look down and villainize all their traditional practices. But then later he, spoiler alert if you want to read the book, he makes his way back home, and then he's initiated in his traditional teaching. But this was a beautiful experience for him because he was able to see both worlds in both experience. He was able to have the spiritual experience of his community and initiations based on his traditional way of living. But he was also aware of what the white world was teaching, the European world was teaching. And from there, he could create something more powerful to help his people, if that makes sense, which I think is a beautiful story, especially for spiritual Africans in the diaspora who are seeking a different way to make sense of it all. But basically in that, he also gets to explore like the spiritual realm, like consciousness, and that there's more than this physical form, and that we are more than just this physical being. And we live among so many other dimensions and so many ways of existing. And you are also more than just your physical form, right? And therefore your physical form is something that you have right now, that you use right now, but it's not something that is the end and be all of who you truly are, like your divine spark, the spirit, the awareness within you, right? And I found that really beautiful, especially like now I'm trying to read more African perspective of spirituality, and like to balance these worldviews out. But I'm also just enjoying randomly. I feel like I found a way to be so intuitive in the sense of the things that come my way or the things that I become curious about. Like I can be just curious about, oh, I wonder how that works out. I wonder, and then like I'll find a book or I'll find a YouTube video, podcast, or someone speaking. I'm like, so it's this whole different way of existing with life where you see that life is also beyond just the 3D world, like life is even other parts that we don't see, that we don't imagine. And then when you add like the exploration of quantum physics into that, especially if you're somebody who's very practical and pragmatic and you're like, I don't like all this spiritual woo-woo, but like, okay, if science is saying this, even though like to a certain degree, like all very indigenous spiritual teachings have already explored that and talked about those parts to a certain degree. If you've already been brainwashed by the Western world, like even though like I think it's Audre Lorde who said the master's tools cannot tear down his house, I would like to add like sometimes because you are made in those tools, you need those tools also to deconstruct that world, if that makes sense. So learning a lot about what quantum physics is finding and pairing it with this more spiritual leaning or spiritual awareness exploration. So like things like quantum entanglement, which means like there is like this higher connection that influences everything, right? Or that it's not just about what is observed, is not fixed, and it can be changed and manipulated simply by being observed. So the observer is interacting and shaping what is being observed. It's a lot of stuff, but it's really interesting, and it opens us to these other spaces that for a while haven't been explored in Western science. There's other science than Western science. I like to say that because sometimes we say science and we think science is just neutral, but like it's not. The way you engage with exploration of life is also very much tied to your context in life. Like a man is going to research differently and find solutions and findings differently. And so is a woman, somebody who is spiritual, not spiritual. And even though we have like scientific methods that we suppose, but even the creation of those methods have to come from a certain worldview. Do you understand? So there is a lot of deconstructing in all of that, like from a contextual perspective, basically. But I would say that where life is now, where I'm able to understand, okay, there is the physical self, there is the life that has always been, and there's certainly life that will always be. And there is the you that has experienced this life in this body, but then there's also the awareness of that life that is what leaves. I think also there was like a finding that says when somebody dies and like their spirit lives their body, like there is a change even in their weight, which I find fascinating. I don't know if that's true, so do write below if that's not true, if it's just a myth. So there is a part that leaves, like maybe that's the spirit, maybe that's the this consciousness that goes, and where does it go, right? Why doesn't it get disintegrated with everything else? Like, why is this part specific? Listening to a lot of near-death experience or like even death experience of people that come back and what they share, and it's always like similar stories of like going back to this place of love, of warmth. And of course, there's some who have really catastrophic near-death experiences. And the more I watch, the more I get curious about that. It's also based on what your consciousness believes while you're alive to a certain degree in some way or the other. But there's also something beautiful in understanding that wherever we come from is a beautiful place. Because look at this, like I'm looking out the window and it's like I'm in this beautiful place with a lot of wonderful nature. And that's where I've been like the last few months, like just in beautiful natural spaces, listening to birds, listening to the sound of just mornings and night and like fully visible night skies with all the stars. It reminds me of like when I was a child in Uganda, like the magic of the night sky, right? Like how it would illuminate everything because there was no light pollution. Anyway, that's a whole other story. What I'm trying to say is, for me, the decolonization of death, and especially through leaving religion, has allowed me to embrace life totally different. It has allowed me to become more engaged in my life here, because understanding that nobody gets to say what you're supposed to do while you're here, like nobody has that right. I don't believe that. Makes you feel like, okay, well then if I'm making the rules of what I want to experience and the order I want to experience it and where I want to experience it, I have to be very intentional and I have to be mindful. I have to be very curious and open-minded to choose, you know? I have to create my reason to be for myself. And I have to feel aligned with that. And I have to feel motivated by that. But I feel like it also gives you an opportunity to live a very vivid life. Like, I feel like removing all that fear, oh my God, like fear is such a big thing, guys. Like, there's so many things you do and you don't know it, but you're motivated by fear of what you don't want to happen, not what you'd like to experience or where you'd like to go, who you'd like to become. But it's all the things that you don't like. I need to do this so this doesn't happen. I need to do that so I might get love. I need to, like this feeling of urgency, of mustness, of, I don't know if that's the word, mustness, of just suppressive energy that doesn't allow us to fully become and fully bloom. And I think that's the saddest part about not getting a chance to design life for yourself and investigate and question life for yourself, examine your life for yourself, that you get to live a life that never feels fully yours, and a life most likely like catering to the avoidance of certain fears, or controlled by who tells you what to fear next and what solution they might give you for that fear, like what remedy they come up with for that fear. And you are at the mercy of a life where you're just reacting to life, not actually choosing and responding and creating. And so then you end up maybe even living to 100 or what have you, but you didn't really live because all your life was about avoiding, fears. And all your life was maybe even avoiding death. So you're willing to do stuff to your body, to your well-being, maybe even enforce it on other people, to get you more life, but not quality of life, When you know that you're going to die someday and you've made peace with that, you are more willing to take chances and take risks, right? And like I was saying, like when there was the enslavement of Africans, and it was really hard for a lot of the European enslavers because some African people had really strong spiritual beliefs, enough for them to prefer death than enslavement. So they needed actually to make them religious very fast and make them know that their bodies are not theirs and that they will go to hell if they died or they killed themselves, and that they will be punished for not being obedient to their worldly masters. And that's easy to believe when you believe that there is a divine master over you or divine, So these teachings to people who are already traumatized made them also better slaves for the enslavers, right? And those who were defiant and refused and remembered their more traditional teaching, or who had very strong, because all of Africa is not the same. And I remember like the story specifically about the Zulus. Like when you have strong like convictions about life and death, you are also easily able to find strength and grounding in that to fight for your liberation, or to even liberate your body to say that if I can't live on this earth the way I know I deserve and as a dignified being, I'd rather not be here at all, This was a very scary thought for a lot of like controlling structures. And even when you look at European history and how the church was a big part in like demonizing unalivings of oneself, or like people like whose lives were so hard, like through serfdom. Is that how you say that? Did I spend too much time online? Because like this idea of domination and the structures of oppressions, like before they were enforced on Africans and indigenous people, they were practicing it in Europe, obviously. And these inequality of existing was a very natural way because the resources in Europe were not very abundant, whereas we were in the tropics eating mangoes, doing too much, making festivals every other week or month. We didn't even care. There was no weeks or months. Well, they were sharpening their ways of fighting and of conquering, of killing, because they needed to do that. We didn't need to, so we weren't as advanced in those parts, right? We had other priorities of our existence, basically. But what I want to say about that, like, understanding that if we don't control what people believe, what happens to them when they die, and why they're here, and why they have to be good people, according to the structures of oppressions or the structures of control, then we lose the whole structures we're trying to build, like either through like the monarchies or all these stories that were made up to make people feel comfortable in their station in life, but then like how to not make them revolt also included like telling them, giving them spiritual teachings, religious teaching, education that made them fear certain things, that made them fear exploring even certain ideas. The villainization of certain spiritual practices that could help people connect more to their consciousness or our shared consciousness. And the ensuring like through like the Roman Empire of destroying anything that didn't work to sustain the structure as it was, through like kings and queens and lords and the peasants that just had to be there working for the advantage of these very few people. So religion became very useful once they could see like it could keep people aligned, people in line, and it could tell people that actually if you just are a good person on earth, like even God said that you should obey your earthly masters. I am your earthly masters. Even Jesus in the Bible is saying like give Caesar to what Caesar deserves and to God. But like this idea of legitimizing the structures of oppression and inequality and telling them if you don't, because any rule only matters if you can back it up with a threat, you know? Or something that people fear if you want to be more discreet. If you don't, when you die, you will go to hell. If you don't, we can kill you. So this fear of death and what we are, thinking that we are only this physical realm. So if you kill me, it's over. But now if I feel, if I remember, if I've learned that no, actually, there's a part of me that no law, no oppression, nothing could ever touch, and it's forever. It's not even forever in the way we understand. It has always been, will always be, and you have no power over me. I am sovereign, and I get to choose how I want to be here. Like that was a big threat for a lot of powerful structures, people who had claimed the right to rule over so many other people. So by suppressing education, and then when education got spread out, by suppressing what people could learn about, by enforcing religions on so many people around the world, especially specific religions that they don't care if you're Muslim or Christian or what have you, as long as you have this framework of fear in some way, you know, that if you are not this and that, when you die, this and that will happen to you, but also believing that you are just this vessel that is not able to choose to be sovereign over yourself, that needs to be managed, needs to be controlled, needs to, all of these things, right? So basically for me, leaving all those things behind and questioning, and I continue to grow, I continue to learn, has been like a very liberating thing. And I think about even my own lineage, like how my lineage has been very religious. And it's interesting because my mother's side has been Christian for several generations, and my father's side has been Muslim. And whatever I learned about people who didn't choose this or that has been very demonized. So it didn't matter what religion you belonged to, as long as you believed in some of these Abrahamic beliefs, which we mostly got as Africans from our colonizers anyway, or our invaders. But our own spiritual practices were for sure always vilified, demonized. Let's say demonized because I know how to say that better. We're always demonized, whether it was by Christianity or Islam. It didn't matter. You just have to know that don't believe what is not in this very specific boxed in book. Everything else, what you feel connected to, you're questioning. If it can't be answered by this, take it away, you know? So it was a way to box people in. And even though like it created order in some places, it also limited our understanding of who we are as beings and what we are able and capable of, and also how to stand and live from a place of sovereignty. And that for me is what now I'm exploring on a bigger scale, like living and continuously living a life that is based in sovereignty. And what does that feel like for me? And how do I create more of that for myself? But also, how do I help other people who are curious about it explore it better, and become more curious about it, and find more empowerment through that exploration, especially as an African woman. Like I feel like that's such a, by itself, like if that's all I've accomplished this life, like leaving religion behind, decentering whiteness or the Eurocentric worldview, decentering the patriarchal worldview, and connecting fully to what also benefits someone like me, like a different way of seeing life, the purpose of life, the pace of life, the rewards of life. Like, if that's all I've accomplished in this one life, I'm already very grateful. And I hope that that would add at least a different perspective. I can be that aunt in the family who maybe for others is the black sheep, or for others has lost their way. But I don't feel lost. I feel more grounded. I feel more assured of my life. And also especially because my life doesn't need to be agreed upon from other people to be true to me. You know, like in religious teachings, there is like, okay, because you're not going to follow our teaching, you're going to go to hell. And I'm like, okay, yeah, according to you. But that's the difference between our perspectives, that you get to live a life that you believe I'll go to hell, and I get to live a life where you can believe that and it doesn't influence how I see my life or where I go when I die. Like, mine is not attached to what you believe, if that makes sense. Like, or for people who believe like that, you know, it allows for all perspectives to exist, because it opens up that there is as many paths, as many ways, as many choices. There is no singular way. There's no singular understanding. There's no, you know, and I find that really liberating and really giving of purpose. And it makes my life feel, more exciting. And not only exciting, but like, even if all I do is lay on this bed a whole day and stare out, like, there's no inner judgment of like, oh, I should be this, I should go this, I should do that. It's mostly, now don't get me wrong, like, I'm still human. There's still a lot of things that I'm also working on, and especially a lot of indoctrination that is still embedded in my being. But whenever it comes up, I'm like, interesting. Why do I think like that? Where does that come from? Like, I always invite how I've learned. I didn't always feel like that, but it's through this long journey. Like, I've been on this path now for 10, 15 years. So like, it's been a long journey of unlearning and reimagining and rethinking. And I feel like now where I am with all of that, like, yeah, whatever I live, whatever I experience, good or bad, when I have fears, I question them. I don't just see them as fixed. Like, oh yeah, I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid if I don't have this by the time I'm that age, or by the time I retire, or I'm afraid if I don't have children, or if I, like, this fixed idea of what you're supposed to do in this limited time to succeed in this life, so that you can maybe not be punished when you die or feel like your life is a failure. It doesn't really matter. Because you're just here to live. I've already done, like, my life feels richer. I think that's the way I can cut this down. My life feels richer. Like, it's already enough. It's already enough. Everything else is a bonus, if that makes sense. That's at least how it feels. And I'm excited to keep learning, to keep growing, and keep exploring. And when it's time to leave, I'm excited to return to whatever I came from, and then become a part of creation again in one way or the other, or create from another perspective. If you're intrigued by the things I talk about, don't hesitate to check out my website. I also give holistic decolonial sessions. If they resonate and you would like to have a guide on this path, somebody to share space with, to share a bit of direction so you can find your grounding, I'd be more than happy to do that. I love holding sessions for people. I feel it's one of the things that are truly true to who I am, and I feel aligned whenever I do it. I always feel like this is exactly what I should be doing. Or you can check out also my Bloom Baby Bloom studio, where I make art also aligned with these philosophies. And I'm working on my next drop for spring, which I think is going to be much, much more clearer in all those things. So I'm so excited about that. I think I would make a video where I talk more about the spiritual things I'm exploring. But for now, that's what I'm going to say about death. And that also helped me, like, as I've shared with you guys, when my sister passed away, something that would have been really hard had I still been religious wasn't as hard, actually, because I understood, like, even when we put her on the ground, and that was really painful, like, in the sense of, like, now she's going to be here and she's not going to exist anymore. Like her body is going to be taken apart, right? At least from my understanding. But there was this beautiful knowing that her spirit, which is the part I love the most, which was maybe living in this vessel that I saw as her, that lives on forever. And that is going to just be liberated to become something else. That was really comforting. Of course, there's still the pain of missing and grief, but because I was so connected to my sister and I truly believe she was my first proper soulmate in life, and she helped me survive like such a tremendously traumatizing childhood. Like we were like really, I'd even say like mashed in a way that wasn't healthy, because as we got older we learned like how to actually not be that way, and that was hard for me and also for her in certain parts. But being together from the beginning of my life, I mean since I was 2 years old, like having her as my little sister and then my best friend, it made my life here more manageable. Like I could live because she existed. And so when I lost her, had I not have done all of that work before, I think it would have killed me in a different way than it did. Like I lost a part of me, but I also understand that she, her true essence, can never be lost, will never be lost. And the same with me. And that made it easier for the people that I know I've lost or the people I might lose in the future to see it like that and to mourn their maybe physical existence, but know that their true essence can never be destroyed and can never disappear. Like that is forever. Anyway, I'm going to stop the video here. I think it's a long one. I hope you've enjoyed it. There's a lot, of course, I've sprinkled in here and a lot of things that are open for further explanation, but that's what I'm going to leave you with. Those are like the key point things of how I got to where I am and why I feel braver to live a more freer life, and redefining my reason to exist. Anyway, guys, I hope that's been of benefit. And as I say, like, I love to hear from your perspective too. What do you think about this? What does this bring up on your end? What explorations have you made in this space? And I hope you're living a beautiful life, and I hope it's a life of your choosing and your making. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys. Sofia.